this for a minute, because there is this statement that is from the Ministry of Interior and National Administration and by the CS, and it's talking about plans to manage such situations better. Let me just go through it briefly. So they say they want to introduce what they're calling subsidiary legislation in the form of regulations to the Public Order Act and the Statutory Instruments Act, which will deal with such issues like notification procedures that you talked about, the duties of security agents to protect those who are protesting, the demarcation of assembly and petition zones, the duty of public agencies and institutions, the duty of the organizers of assemblies and demonstrations, amongst other things. So let's talk about this. Perhaps you can explain to us the context, because there was, a court ruling by Justice Macau that led to this process, and what this means now, this plan now by the Ministry of Interior to try and regularize or streamline the processes that we've discussed here.
On the face of it, it would be a good idea because the concept of rights also goes with the responsibilities, and so therefore your right to enjoy the right given to you in the Constitution start and end at the point where my rights begin. And so therefore they ought to be, it might be a good idea to have some sort of balance in how this is done. So what we know is that there are so many other countries. I think even South Africa has some sort of law in terms of how protests are supposed to be managed. Mm-hmm. But I know that even in South Africa, some of those, the provisions in those acts have been challenged and been declared unconstitutional, especially where you require, for example, that there must be a notice that precedes the demonstration. And the court has found that to be unconstitutional because, for example, if school children want to protest that their playground is being grabbed, do you expect them to now go and give a notice to a police station? So there are some of those things that those requirements for notice, sometimes in the legislation that do come up, are couched in such a way that it takes away the right of any person to picket.
Do you think that's the case with these proposals that have been set out? Do they undermine Article 34 of the Constitution, or do they enhance it?
We will have to see, because it's actually Article 37.
37, yes.
Yes. We'll have to see once they come out and test them against the Constitution, because the Constitution is very clear that you cannot limit rights under the Constitution unless such limitations are acceptable within an open democratic society. So that would be the test at which any of those proposed legislative measures would be looked at. And then secondly, the other question would be whether in the first instance, the cabinet secretary can come up with those kind of regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those would be the two tests.
So let's talk about this for a minute to just understand, because they've talked about subsidiary legislation through regulation. So what does that mean from a legal standpoint? Would that go through the normal making law process in Parliament, first reading, second reading, committee stage and everything for presidential assent? Or is this just something that can be done without going through that entire process? Would this be something that would require public participation, for instance, because it touches on a right that is constitutionally given? What would that look like based on at least what the CS has said?
Of course, because it is subsidiary legislation, it doesn't have to go through the normal stages that a bill goes through. But ideally, they would publish the regulations, subject them to public participation, And then once they have subjected them to public participation, they will take them to the subsidiary legislation committee of the Assembly, of the National Assembly, which will look at it, confirm that public participation has been conducted, the nature of public participation that was conducted, and then thereafter, if they are satisfied that the public was sufficiently consulted and that the public has had an opportunity to input their views, and those views have been taken into consideration, then they will authorize it, and it will be gazetted and take effect.
Yeah. And you can take a look at some of those that they plan to put up, which is, for instance, responsibility for cleanup costs, limitations on the number of assemblers, demonstrators, picketers, and petitioners at any particular occasion. And then there would be a consent requirement for persons whose activities are likely to be affected by demonstrators, picketers, and petitioners and assemblers. What do you make of this?
That's why I'm saying that when you read the statement, you begin to see the mischief. You begin to see the mischief because if I have a right to assemble, then how do I, for example, go to seek consent of other people? Because I have a right to exercise my. So what we are basically trying to do is to be mischievous in terms of how we are applying the law, and we don't want to speak so much until after they set out the regulation. But you can clearly see that there is a mischievous intent in those.
Yeah.
And then secondly,
however, they do base it though on a judgment by Justice Macau, which was in that petition of 2016, Gunjiri Wambugu versus the Inspector General of Police, the CS for Interior, and the Attorney General. So they might say, we're following up on that order, but that was given by Justice Macau, which was to the respondents, in which case was the Ministry of Interior and the Attorney General, to go out and amend the law accordingly. So they might say, look, hey, there is a court order here, and we're simply following the law and implementing orders that were given by the court.
Chances are that is what they will say. And then the one thing you can always be sure about is that when the government is very keen, in quotes, to comply with a court order, you have to be a little bit worried, because this government has already shown that they have very little regard for court order. So you want to ask yourself, why is it that the government in this instance appears to be extremely keen to implement a decision of the court? But that said and done, I'm basically saying that the manner in which, and it is a good thing to say that, how do you enhance Article 37? Mm-hmm. Yeah, do we make provisions for enhancing Article 37, for ensuring that as people picket, also the rights of others are not infringed? So there might be a good idea to make some sort of regulation that says, let's do this. But the real proof of whatever would be done in terms of the proposals that will be done would be tested on whether those provisions advance the enjoyment of Article 37 or they curtail. Because where they advance, then that is it is in order, because it is in compliance with the Constitution. But where they curtail, the question would be, is that curtailment of those rights justifiable in an open democratic society? And there's a lot of court cases on this. There's a lot of jurisprudence and direction. We even have the UN rapporteur on the right to assembly and right to picket. So so those are things that are recognized at the UN level. Yeah. So there's a lot,
and we'll wait and see. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in a little bit, Eric. Please bear with me. I would like us to get an update from Brenda Wanga, who's at the CBD here in Nairobi, and she's joining us now. Brenda, what's the situation looking like on our screens now? We're seeing Kawangware as the procession seems to make its way out of Kawangware, possibly into the CBD. But what does the CBD look like?
Well, Yvonne, this is the second Monday in in 2 weeks that the CBD on a Monday doesn't look like its usual self. It looks more of a Sunday afternoon than what would have been a normal busy business day here in the CBD. From as early as 7 a.m. in the morning, activity here has been very limited, especially in the upper parts of the CBD where we are in Wabera Street, Kenyatta Avenue, Standard Street. Many of the businesses, many of the offices not opening for business today, and those that had opened a little bit earlier in the afternoon hours have decided to close shop as there's literally very little business activity taking place here. Many people staying away on account of the demonstrations that have been called by the opposition, this being the second one. The third one will be happening on Thursday, but the opposition had asked the city residents to stay away today, as this the CBD will be the venue of those demonstrations, like you mentioned earlier, making their way from Kawangware. We don't know whether they intend to terminate here in the CBD, because unlike last Monday when the protesters and demonstrators had been given a starting point for the protest, which was right behind me at the KICC, this time round there hasn't been that kind of communication. So there haven't been a lot of people coming into the CBD, the protesters particularly, to kick off those demonstrations. Last week we did see pockets of people making their way into the CBD from as early as 8 a.m. By around 10, 11 a.m. we had seen the demonstrators beginning their action, and the response from the police, that is the use of tear gas and water cannons to disperse them. Today a different scenario. There has been quite an increase in the number of security personnel that have been posted at various installations within the CBD. The KICC, we've seen police officers cordoning it off. The office of the president and his deputy, also a significant number of security personnel there. The police headquarters, Vigilance House, also getting its fair share of security personnel. Just most significant installations in this city have had security increased. The Jivanji Gardens, which normally plays host to the Mwananchi Parliament or Bunge, also today cordoned off, no one being allowed to get in there. So that is the situation here in the CBD, Yvonne. If my cameraman could just perhaps try and give us a clearer picture of what exactly we are talking about here. You can clearly see that this is about 3 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, but there is very limited activity taking place. Most of the eateries here have not opened. Their places that have opened operating at a very limited, reduced capacity. Plenty of parking, Yvonne, on a Monday afternoon in Nairobi, which is totally unusual. So it just gives you an indication of how the CBD is looking here today. Like I mentioned earlier, we're not sure whether that motorcade making its way from Kawangware will terminate here in the CBD. But what we do know is that most of the entry points into the CBD have been cordoned off, have been blocked. Security personnel having erected barriers, of put in place a number of security officers who are just making sure that there is no unusual movement into the city of large numbers of people. But we are still waiting to see, as we keep a keen eye on that motorcade making its way, we'll be able to tell whether it will make its way here into the CBD or not. But as of this moment, the situation here is calm, unusually so. Yvonne?
Thank you, Brenda Wanga, live from the CBD. Stephen, it's unusually calm, as Brenda says. It's akin to a Sunday afternoon, actually, she says. And this is now, the second time from Monday last week. We shall see if, they make good their promise to have this again on Thursday. What sort of conversations are happening amongst your members within the FKE regarding this? Are people working from home now on Mondays? What does this mean for your members?
For the employers, it means it's a lost day. Lost productivity. It's not calm. What we are seeing as calm, it means there's no business. And for our members, let's take it. Kenya is not highly a technological advanced country that people can work from home. If you have to go and sell your wares, you have to be at where you have to sell. If you have to sell, perhaps if you have a restaurant, you have to open it. When we did a survey during COVID and just try to find out how many employers were able to deploy their staff to work remotely, we found out that only 10% of employers could deploy 20% of their staff. Only 10% could deploy 20%. And so in that situation, let's forget about saying people are working remotely. They are not working. It's a lost day. But what is important? I know people. I know my colleague here says dialogue will not yield results. We are in a situation. When we are in a situation, we have to take actions that de-escalate the situation in any conflict. What is the action that is going to de-escalate the situation is when the two principals have a dialogue. That's the starting point. You cannot, we cannot have perpetual demonstrations, and we cannot have a government that buries its head in the sand and assume nothing is happening. We have a challenge. The two principals have a responsibility, and the president has a contract with the people of Kenya, a mandate to ensure that this does not continue in the confines of the law. And the only way out, we operate in the labor sector, where we have strikes, where we have disagreements, and we know that we can disagree, but agree on how we are going to deal with our disagreement. It doesn't mean that when we disagree, it doesn't give us an opportunity for us to sit down and get a solution. What we are witnessing is not a legal challenge, is a political challenge. We have a political situation. It requires a political solution. And for political solution, politicians must be able to sit down and provide that political solution. After all, that is what when we vote them in, or when we elect them or allow them to be our political leaders, it means they need to bring political situations to whatever challenges we face. Now, we have, if you look at the situation we are in, and what the opposition or the Azimio group has said, we have issues we need to present to the president. What is the easiest way out? The president to sit and say, I've listened to the country, because he's a president of the whole country, of all functions, whether you are in opposition, you are in Azimio, you are in Kenya Kwanza, he's still your president. I've listened to the call of the other side. On this Thursday, I'm seated in our Taharambe House or in State House. Come, bring your petition. Will we have the demonstrations? Will there be any reason to demonstrate when you're saying we have issues that needs to be addressed? They're saying, bring those issues. Let me receive them, have a cup of coffee and tea, and then agree that, okay, these are the issues. We might not have solutions for them now, but can we now work on a framework to be able to solve them? Okay. Because we have to come out of a situation. All right. We cannot continue to be in that situation and say the two principals should not talk to each other.
Okay. I know we've got Vincent Kimosop on the line, and we'll get to him in a moment. He is live from Nakuru, but I'd just like you to respond. How do we get ourselves out of this situation? Is it a political or a legal situation? Is it both? And I know you've said, well, all that needs to happen is, we follow the rule of law. But, here we are. It's the second Monday. There might be something on Thursday. Who knows about next week, Monday and Thursday. So what do we do? What are your thoughts? We don't dialogue? How do we get out of this?
Not that it's not so easy to see how you can get out of this situation, because even if you have dialogue and this protest and people go back to work, we still are facing the same problems that we're facing. For example, you have a list of public appointments that are being made that on the face of it appear to be favoring two major tribes to the exclusion of all the other, with a sprinkling of, political supporters of the current regime. Now, if you look at it in terms of what the Constitution provides, that is not what the Constitution envisaged. So even if you have dialogue, do you sort out the issue that is at the core of this challenge? Because this is a political agitation because the government is behaving in a particular way that is excluding the leadership. So if the discussion that is going to be there is about national inclusion, if it is about addressing the challenges that the common man and woman are facing, then that can be done. The question then would be, don't we have enough institutions which this dialogue then can be conducted? Because we have parliament.
Yeah.
And we have elected our members, we have elected
our representatives to parliament.
So why should we go outside the established institutions to be able to deal with some of these issues? If we are looking at the price of unga, if you're looking at the price of common commodities, why don't we deal with it at that particular level?
So while protesting is a right that is granted by the Constitution, should then these petitions be taken to the National Assembly, Eric? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that dialogue at this particular point is a short-term relief to the challenges that we are facing. The real issue that we have in this country is one of governance. And that's what we now need to start focusing on. Not focusing on institutions on individuals, but focusing on institutions and building these institutions to be able to intervene on the challenges facing the country and each and every one of us. But if we take the politically convenient route of now saying that these two principles should talk to one another, they will just talk, but they will still leave us with the problems that we are facing, because the problems that we are facing are ones of governance. And let's go back a bit. What Victor was telling us, when Raila Odinga was working very well with Uhuru Kenyatta, we still had these problems. We still had these problems. So you want to ask yourself, what has changed just by virtue of President Ruto getting into office? So that it's this process that is going on is a Tom and Jerry kind of game that is going on, gerrymandering, the so-called change of musical chairs.
Yes.
But none of it is addressing the real issues. So we need to actually go to that point where we begin to address the real issues in this country, and those are issues of governance.
Okay.
Because unless we get governance right, we will still be going round and round and round in circles.
The same, and round the same issues. Eric, you mentioned what Vincent had talked about earlier, and we now have him. Vincent, so we're saying our problems are much deeper than, what we have now. And that's not to discount, the issues that Kenyans are facing, the high cost of living. There's an increase, at least for some users, perhaps, of electricity, who are facing that. And now we're saying we need deeper talks. And even as we do that, Vincent, I just want to inform our viewers of the pictures we're now seeing. The procession was in Kawangware before, trying to make its way out of Kawangware. This is now Ngong Road, and this is what appears, we can see a tear gas canister that has been lobbed there and tossed back. So now we'll wait to see which way this procession goes. And we understand there have been barricades into the CBD. So just to inform you, our viewers, that the pictures you are seeing on your screen now, a bit of a shift from what we've seen. We've spent some time in Kawangware for maybe a little over an hour. Now this is Ngong Road, and we'll be telling you what the final destination is. We're not able to determine that at this point. But these are the pictures you're seeing on your screens. now on Ngong Road out of Kawangware. Which way they're headed, we will let you know as we carry on with this live broadcast. If we still have Vincent Kimosop. Vincent, so our issues are bigger, they're deeper. But to be fair, Vincent, we've been talking about these issues for decades now. You know, we've reached, points like these in the state of our nation. We've talked about politics of exclusion. We even promulgated a new constitution in 2010, and we decided things were going to be different. But yet, Vincent, here we are again. With a stalemate. And now we're talking about dialogue again. So, what happens? What sort of dialogue is this that we need? And how do we address those deeper issues that we seem to have agreed on around this table are the problem?
Yvonne, I want to say that we are not alone in this. Let me just give you an example, and that's the advantage of having people like us in such panel. If you look, Yvonne, at America, they are a democracy of over 250 years, and they still have issues. One of them is the issue of racism. But because they have invested in building their institutions, that even in tough times, their institutions deliver for them. So I want to say that I know the sense of fatigue is here, but I want to say we are in a place whereby somebody like Abraham Lincoln was. He was sworn in, and the day he was sworn in, you had states that were seceding from the Union. And this is really a Lincoln moment where you can be able to transform the opportunity, because leaders should be able to see crises as opportunities to be able to address underlying issues. So for me, I am choosing to see beyond the current players, raise the importance of dealing with underlying issues. I hear the chairman of Law Society who has said that we need just to follow the Constitution. I want to say the things that we have. Yes, the Constitution provides a framework, but this Constitution is being implemented by people that requires incrementally innovativeness to be able to get the country making progress. So I would want to say that we have a country to build. We have issues of national cohesion that we must address. We have to address the current political system to facilitate inclusion. I support, for example, the amendment of the Constitution to introduce the position of official opposition to have this conversation happening on the floor of Parliament. Because, Yvonne, I can tell you, it does not matter. Ultimately, when all is said and done, if an agreement is agreed, some of them will require Parliament to pass legislation. So these conversations needs to go there. I also want to say that when we have the opportunity, if we structure this conversation and we are bold and courageous enough to confront the things we've been sweeping under the carpet, that people will see actually even beyond the current president, see beyond even the leader of the opposition, be able to say, hey guys, these are the issues we must confront. And that is one of the things I want to say, Yvonne, we need a session, like even in leading media houses like Citizen, just for us to say, what does history say? How did we overcome in 2007? What is the most sustainable and institutional way of getting this out, where we get the emotions going down and we provide practical solutions that will get us out of here, not only get us out of here, but in a sustainable way.
Yeah, and Vincent, you talked about, if we are addressing the issues that we are going forward, the institution and its implementation is, a continuous process. I'm not sure we'll ever get to the point where we say, okay, good, great, 100% of our constitution has been implemented, we're in a great place. But there was something that you said that caught my ear, is that, the players are largely the same, Vincent. So you would then understand the sort of lethargy that Kenyans have. These are the same players we've had, in the country's political space for decades. They perhaps change and switch sides, and these are the same leaders we're now constantly asking to come to the table, dialogue, sit, let's find a way forward. Is there a sense of frustration in that respect?
No, and that's why I was saying that that's one of the interesting things about democracy, Yvonne. If you look, for example, in Israel, Netanyahu has been in the picture for long. At times they get into crisis when it comes to security, they bring him on. That happens in democracies, and at times you have players overstaying, but we need to continuously keep our eyes on the ball. For example, Yvonne, I can tell you, if you talk to many Kenyans at the moment, one of the things they would want to say is that how do we ensure that the demonstration comes to an end? And as technical people like us, we're able to say, hey, even though the demonstrations comes to an end, even if we don't address the long-term issues that bring us here. Look, Yvonne, 2007, what happened? Martha Karua was not on the same side. Today, they're on the same side. Kalonzo Musyoka was on his own, 2007. Now, fast forward, you have the president with the former prime minister all on the same side.
Yeah.
So that's why I appeal to us to say that if we look beyond them to see what are these underlying issues, then we are able to be bold enough to be able to put our house in order as a people and as a country.
Okay. Interesting thoughts about where we are, and we're saying there is history here. And so may this not be a Band-Aid, that we now start to address those issues deeper. And just to inform our viewers, you can see the procession has really picked up pace now. Out of Kawangware onto Ngong Road. I'm told this is around the ASK showground. Like we said, final destination of this procession is not yet known, whether they will congregate somewhere, maybe closer to the CBD. We do not know that at the moment, or whether they will be able to present a petition today. But as you saw earlier in Kawangware, there was quite a bit of that. But now, looks like it's slowed down once again. Our Stephen Leto is with this procession. As soon as we can get a hold of him, we will. But we've seen also the scenes in the Nairobi CBD, all quiet. I think rather different from last week, Monday, when we saw a bit of fracas in the CBD. So we will get to that in a moment, even as we continue to update you on where this is headed. Here we are now saying, okay, we've got deeper issues. We want to talk about them. So, Stephen, we talk, and then do we need to do like an immediate situation first, and then talk about those big things later? And when we do talk about them, let's assume FKE is on that table. What will FKE be saying? What are the issues, deeper, the more historical ones, the recent ones, the immediate ones? What will FKE be saying if you get to be seated at a table to say, hey, this is where we see the nation now, this is where we want it to be?
Yvonne, first of all, talks cannot happen in this environment. And that's why the two principals sitting around the table will de-escalate the situation and then give an ample environment where the deeper issues can be addressed. Yvonne, if you've been in this country, and you remember from 2015, the FKE Executive Director, Jacqueline Mugo, talked about the question of jobs. And she said, and I'm just trying to quote what she said. Yeah. She said, if we do not incentivize the business community, create the environment that will be able to create employment, the unemployment challenge of the youth is going to become a national crisis. Now, the difference of why most of the people who are not perhaps in the protests is they're seated somewhere waiting. They have unemployment, they have a job, and they have a comfort. Most of the people who do not have that are on the street, that the people feeling the high cost of living. In the same year, the executive director of the Federation, Madam Jacqueline Mugo, and you can go and look at the speech that was offered at the Labor Day celebration, and the speech that she gave when we had the summit in Naivasha, which the former president was the chief guest. She said, if we do not look at our productivity issues, the costs of goods and the situation of the wages that are not able to afford certain lifestyle is going to catch up with us. Those were deeper issues. We were seeing them as early as 2015, saying this needs to be addressed. Now, when we issued our manifesto last year, we talked of 5 things that needs to happen. We said the first one, we need to have an environment that is predictable. Because when an environment is predictable, as businesses, you are able to plan your resources for them to become productive. As a country, you can be able to move forward. And what we are seeing is an environment that is unpredictable. If this continues, what options the business are going to have? I mean, you cannot invest in an environment that is like this unless if you are investing in the tear gas canisters. But you cannot, as an investor, you cannot even put your business in Nairobi in the CBD when there is no traffic. I mean, those businesses are moved by traffic. You cannot. Yeah. So this needs to change. The second thing that we indicated to government, we said the cost of business is high. I mean, if you remember the last debate, I think it was between the deputy president candidates, Martha Karua and Honorable Martha Karua and His Excellency the Deputy President.
Rigathi Gachagua at the time.
And the closing statement of His Excellency the Deputy President was, we need to put money in the pockets of people. Yeah. You don't put money in the pockets of people by increasing the taxes. You don't put money in the pockets of people by allowing a situation in the country where businesses are not able to operate. Mm-hmm. The indicator that we should be asking the current government and the president is, how are you putting money in people's pockets? It just means if you look at whatever we are talking about, the cost of living and all that is taking away the money from the pockets of people. And so we are in a situation where we need government to be able to address this fundamental. The third thing that we put in our manifesto, and which is in public, we said, and we saw these things coming, we said, can we embrace social dialogue in how we deal with our issues? Because had the parties embraced social dialogue, the government embraced social dialogue, and the opposition embraced social dialogue, we will not be here.
And what does social dialogue mean? Social
dialogue means we have grievances, we have issues that there is a way I see things should move, another person is seeing in a different way, or we have things that we feel are challenges to us. We can sit down as a parties and be able to have a chat over and say, okay, these are the issues we are facing. What proposals do you have? What proposals do I have? And what is a win-win for all of us? Because that is what we need. If we go a hard line away, we are having a situation where we are either all of us losing, like now the current situation we are seeing is all of us is losing, government is losing, opposition is losing, the people of Kenya are losing. Mm-hmm. Nobody is gaining in the current situation. Mm-hmm. And the other situation we also don't want is a situation of winner-lose, that another person is losing, who is winning at the expense of another. Is a win-win situation where we say, we sit down and reach a solution that all of us as a people, whether you are in opposition, you are in government, whether you are a security personnel, or you are just a citizen who is protesting, all of you are winning. Because sometimes we blame the police, but police follows just orders. If you are the junior person on the street.
Eric and George beg to disagree, but carry on. I'll give them a moment.
You have orders. Uh-huh. Do we encourage them to go against the orders? The top brass as the one who are issuing those orders. Yeah. We don't want a situation where they put our young men and young women in such a state. We want our businesses to be able to operate. We want the environment where people can disagree. Look at it. Kenya is ours. Look at it like you are in a family. You have disagreed with your husband or with your wife. You don't take hardline stance and say, I will not talk to her. I will not listen to her. I'm not. Come on. Even when you disagree, you say, we will agree on how we are going to disagree.
Okay.
Even when people have a divorce, they agree on how they are going to go about the divorce. It's still an agreement, and this is what we need. Now we need a situation where the conflict is, we de-escalate it, and then we create now an environment where we can talk about what are the underlying issues, how can we have Vision 2030 in this country, how are we going to achieve it? The 2030 is just here next to us. How are we going to achieve it? We have a bottom-up plan. Is it working? We need that situation. We need to de-escalate the situation so that we can talk about those things.
How do we de-escalate the situation, George?
My colleague has just talked about getting orders from above. And that is something that we are supposed to deal with. Because all our problems when it comes to matters of security, especially when it comes to opposition politics and government politics, has always been that issue of orders from above. Somebody should take responsibility. And you see, if we need to have dialogue, then we need to have an arbitrator, somebody who will be between Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, and somebody who is there to protect the interests of Kenyans. These are supposed to be the police. But if you look at the way they have been operating in the recent past, 2010 we said we should have an independent police service. Inspector General appointed competitively. We went back and said, no, this person should be answerable to the president. And that is why he's talking about getting orders from above. You get these orders, are they constitutional? That is the question that we need to ask these people. Are they constitutional? Are they within the confines of the law? Or you're just being given orders because this is the appointing authority, you want to please him, you go ahead and barricade the city, stopping people from exercising their constitutional right, and in that way, causing more mayhem and problems to the country. Because if you look at the way things have been happening, even in the recent past, let's say on Monday, the police had allowed the OCS. You see, when you're told you must go and see the OCS, you're not going there to notify him that we want to protest. You're going to tell him, I'm having this protest, I need to be given security. You need to agree that yes, you've come, yes, I'll provide security, so long as you keep within the laws. Not that they're going to ask for permission to demonstrate. But if you stop them from seeing the OCS, what is the alternative? Chaos. And that is exactly what we're experiencing now. People are not working. Last Monday we didn't work, this Monday we've not worked, and you see the police are just there on the streets every other day. We are now even not reporting about other crimes that are being committed because of that vacuum that has been left by the police, now that they're only concentrating on dealing with the Azimio protests, which are legal. So there's that procedure of dealing with these kind of situations that is not being followed.
Okay, and there had been allegations of security withdrawn for some of the Azimio leaders, and that was in fact confirmed yesterday by the Inspector General of Police, Japhet Koome, when he spoke to the press yesterday afternoon. What do you make of that? And I'm trying to look for the quote and his response to that. Eric, your comment on this?
Yvonne, I keep saying, and I'm not going to get tired about this, that this discussion, I think we've made it a Kenyan way of handling governance, that of having a national dialogue. And I can see where we are coming from, because it has worked for us before when we've had strife. But the reason why we keep going back there is because we have this dialogue, we have a political settlement, but the software of the people is not changing. And that's where the problem is. What we say in law is that a constitution without constitutionalism cannot survive. So what is the spirit of constitutionalism? The spirit of constitutionalism is the spirit of complying with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. So if we all just go back there and start there as a basic, all these challenges that we are having will be over. Because, for example, the kind of tension that this strong arm response to the protest is causing is that it means next Thursday, if they don't call it off, next Thursday, everyone would be worried. You would be asking yourself, should I go or should I not go? I don't know how it's going to be. Yeah? But suppose that the police were doing the right thing and they had had this discussion and agreed, okay, you're going to do your protest from here. Yes, this is what you're going to do. This is what okay, so you want to present a petition to Gachagwa's office? Yes. Unfortunately, because of the way Gachagwa's office is and the security installations that are there, you can bring your people until this place. Then we will allow 10 or 20 or 30 people who you will pick to go and present this petition, and the media will be there and whatever, and then you will come back and get back to your crowd, because this crowd is too big for all of it to be allowed to come in, and we would be unable to provide security to the critical infrastructure that is surrounding. And that is how proper policing is done. If we do that, we then are in compliance with the Constitution. And what will happen is that then it will be upon Azimio to show that that restriction that has been imposed is an unnecessary restriction. And people are clever enough to be able to tell this is proper and this is improper. And when it is being done in a proper way, no one will have a problem. But for as long as you continue to respond to this, and this is not just the beginning of it, the fact that even the government wanted to stop the media from showing people exactly what is happening should concern us, because that means that it is the scrutiny of the media that is probably making the police respond with less force. So that the intention of getting the media out of this is so that the police can then come and deal with these people in the manner in which. So when you see that kind of thinking, it just tells you that the manner in which the government is approaching this issue is not to de-escalate it, but rather to escalate it. And who is in power? It is the president who is in power. So it is his responsibility to de-escalate the situation. And for me, it's not just about dialogue. It is also about the actions that he is going to take. Because what are the challenges? If he is able to come up with proper measures to address the price of basic commodities, to look at businesses and to tell the businesses, I know you have challenges with the high cost of electricity. This is what we want to do. The Law Society has been challenging several legislation or proposals for legislations that are coming out, because we are looking at the manner in which government wants to impose taxation. And we are saying that if you impose taxation in the manner that you are proposing, you are actually killing businesses. So if you kill businesses, and whereas in taxation, the taxation, some of the principles that you apply in taxation is not just to get money, but also to redistribute wealth. In a situation where there is economic challenges, to give incentives using tax for purposes of creating more wealth. So when you look at the measures that the government is now taking, all those measures go contrary to dealing with the challenges that we are facing. And I think that is what now the president should be talking about. These are the things that the president should be addressing, not taking action in open defiance of the law, of logic, and in a manner that seems to say that utadu, we are in government, this is our company. If you are not a shareholder, forget about it. If they continue with that kind of trajectory, even if these demonstrations subside because either of fatigue or any other settlement, the real problems that the Kenyans are facing and for which they require their leadership to resolve would continue to persist until we get to that level of honesty where the president says, I have been elected and my only consideration are the welfare and the goodwill of the Kenyan people. But so far, the message that they are sending right now is that this is a government for only those that voted for it. That is in the first instance when it comes to sharing political power and the national cake. But secondly, even for those who voted for them, who are the majority, who are, the mamambogas and whatever, your contract with us terminated the moment you elected us into office. Wait for us, in the next 5 years, we will come and give you another manifesto and tell you this is what we could have done for you. You know, it was the other government. No, it was all those things, because we are having too many excuses as opposed to handling the crisis and giving confidence to each and everyone that the government is in charge and it understands the problem that it is facing and it has credible solutions to those challenges. Until we get to that level, this agitation, even if it goes down, will continue in the hearts and minds of the ordinary Kenyans.
Yeah, and there's the issue of withdrawal of security. So yesterday, when Japhet Koome was asked about the security of Azimio leaders being withdrawn, he confirmed it. And he said, and I quote, "Huwezi taka security na unaongoza watu kurushia polisi mawe." Who would like to respond to that? I mean, and we have seen, these measures taken before, in the country where security is withdrawn, and it depends on which side of the government or which side of favor, that you rank, if you're on the leeward side or the windward side, and that's just, an analogy.
Could I say
the legality of this? Yes, please, go ahead, Stephen.
There is a very an important saying that is famous in this country. Mm-hmm. Power is transient. As in everything, whoever makes decision must never forget that. Power is transient. You can make decisions today because you're on this other side. Tomorrow, another person will be on the other side making decisions. I think, and that's what I'm saying, that there needs to be soberness and let the two sides engage each other in an aim of de-escalating the situation. Mm-hmm. If at this time you withdraw the security of the former Honorable Prime Minister, he enjoys that security because of the office he occupies. It doesn't make any sense. You are just escalating the situation. And that's why for us as a business community, as the employers, we're saying these power games, and what my friend here talked about, the game of chairs or moving the chairs that once time was used in Russia, should not happen. Let people sit down in a sober way and de-escalate the situation. If that happens, then we'll have an environment where all these challenges that now, the deeper underlying challenges, will be able to be discussed and solutions found. Some of them might be immediate solutions, others will take time, but we'll have a situation where we are not seeing the challenges we are seeing.
Even on that, I think it's clear in the law how leaders are supposed to be protected. Now, when we start applying the law selectively, depending on which side of the device you are on, then we are treading into dangerous grounds. Because basically, it's written, it's in black and white, that the former Prime Minister is supposed to be accorded this kind of security. The former Deputy President equally. So it's not the responsibility of the Inspector General to decide when to withdraw and when to deploy.
But George, we've seen this before.
We've seen it before, and that's
even
what
with the president now, who, when he was deputy president at the time, and there's a line that we hear constantly from the security officials, which is reorganization and redeployment.
I mean, it clearly tells you the problem is not the law or how it's supposed to be applied. The issue here is the people we have in the police service. Because clearly, it tells you we don't have an independent institution that is supposed to take care of the security of Kenyans at large. If today I'm being given security, tomorrow you're withdrawing because of my political stand, and it's clear that I'm supposed to be given this security, it's written in the books, then what are we talking about here? I mean, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous for us.
Yeah, and
so let's assume something happens now. Who will take responsibility? Who will take responsibility? Is it the Inspector General? Is it the commander of the unit that is supposed to provide protection? Is it the presidency? I mean, we need to ask ourselves these hard questions and agree that if things are being done in the wrong way, we should speak about it and say, no, this is not how it's supposed to happen, and call it out.
And, you know, we're talking about institutions now and the work that they're supposed to do. Eric, earlier on, when we started this conversation, you talked about, you know, those institutions and perhaps them not, you know, functioning as they should. For instance, would this be a conversation that would happen in Parliament? And how would that conversation play out? You know, when you have a parliament that has a majority, and you can see, of course, there's been a lot of movement from one side of the political divide to Kenya Kwanza. But let's talk about, you know, some of the other things that we can do and some of the other institutions that we hope ideally would be able to start to address some of the concerns that are being raised today. Parliament being one of them. You know, what are the others, and how do we strengthen them to be where we want to be and do and address the issues that we elect them to, pay them to do as well, and give them the responsibility and the mandate for 5 years. And then there's also independent constitutional commissions. There's the Law Society of Kenya. There's, you know, it seems like we're not short of institutions in this country that can, that are meant to handle our affairs. You even have the private sector coming together as the Private Sector Alliance, as the Association of Manufacturers. It seems like, you know, we have so many in private sector, in public, independent, constitutional commissions, legislature, 3 arms of government.
I think the first place to begin this conversation is in Parliament. And I would expect, or I would have expected, that the president would have tabled his economic recovery plan or economic stimulus plan, having consulted with the leadership, with the business community, the various business communities, in terms of what are their wish list. How do you see us, you know, assisting you as government to kickstart some of these things, so that you have a national dialogue that happens in Parliament, and in what we call a bipartisan spirit. Mm-hmm. Because in Parliament, the majority and the minority should be able to strike consensus on items of national good. Mm-hmm. So, for example, what we are seeing right now as extremely mischievous responses to the challenges that we are facing. The government will say that we have a problem with the farmers are unable to access farm inputs. And so what are we doing? We are giving a waiver, either a tax waiver for importation of fertilizer or a tax waiver for importation of maize and everything.
And rice, yeah.
But why is that conversation not happening in Parliament? So that it is part of a package. There is accountability. There is a proper discussion in terms of these are the parameters and this is what we need to do, and how will this fertilizer, for example, when it is imported, how will it get to the local farmer? So when you look at the measures that are being taken, you might be tempted to believe that these are private entrepreneurial arrangements that are made between some people in government with the importers of those particular items. And that is the reason why such important decisions that are actually meant for the benefit of Kenyans are not being taken to Parliament. Because the moment you sidestep Parliament, then you create that environment of secrecy, using national good to actually perpetuate private commercial considerations. Look at the proposal, for example, that the government is making to bypass Parliament when it comes to privatization of public resources. That in itself tells you that there is a selfish motive behind that, because these are assets or these are parastatals that have been set up for public good, using public resources. So how can you come up with a law that seeks to bypass Parliament so that it makes it easier for the executive to be able to handle those transactions? So when you look at everything that this government is doing, it is sending it is very consistent on a particular message. It is consistent that it wants to operate in a manner that ditches accountability, transparency. And this is the reason why people are on the streets, because they are looking at every decision that the government is making, and they are not seeing themselves as at the center of those decisions.
Not seeing themselves at the center of that. We're still trying to get to our reporters on the ground to update you, but we can now show you that this is in Kibra. The convoy that started out at least in Kawangware made its way to Ngong Road, was not